So today, Discovery have the pleasure of co-hosting this with the UCD Earth Institute. And we have the pleasure of speaking with Pádraic Fogarty, who's an ecologist and environmental scientist and the campaigns officer for the Irish Wildlife Trust. And he's also the author of a recent book called Whittled Away. And he'll speak to us today about ecosystem collapse in modern Ireland. So, hi Pádraic, how are you today?
Hi Patricia, I'm very well, thanks. Very nice to be with you.
Great, it's great to have you here. So I'm just really interested. So first question for our listeners really is to understand, where are you located and what's keeping you sane while you will continue to work from home?
Right, so I'm based in West Dublin. I live in Castleknock. Luckily for me, I live near the Royal Canal and the Phoenix Park, and so I've been spending a lot of time getting to know my local green spaces and spending lots of time with my family, which is keeping me very sane indeed.
Lovely. So I want to chat to you briefly about your work and also maybe the book you wrote as well, Whittled Away. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that first.
So I work for the Irish Wildlife Trust, which is a non-governmental organisation. We're devoted to promoting the conservation of wildlife, and in particular trying to promote the idea that wildlife is important for people as well. That nature is people are part of nature. 3 years ago I wrote a book called Whittled Away, and really the idea I was trying to get across in that book is that that nature really has virtually vanished from Ireland. You know, we hear about the destruction of the rainforest and the melting of Arctic ice sheets, and we think those things are terrible, but we don't necessarily look closer to home to see, you know, where have our forests gone, where have our peat bogs gone, where have all the fish in our sea gone. So really what we're living in at the moment is a totally collapsed ecosystem, but I didn't really feel that many people understood that idea. So that's really why I wanted to write the book.
Okay, so you sound incredibly passionate about what you do. So maybe, you know, so that's your book, but maybe tell us what you do with the Irish Wildlife Trust.
So yeah, so I've been passionate about nature since I was a child. I've always had a sense of wonder in nature, and I think lots of children do. But then when children become adults, that sense of wonder is sometimes lost. I think I've been lucky that I have held on to that sense of wonder, and you know, even I enjoy looking at, you know, what's going on in my garden or wherever I happen to be. But of course, the flip side is it's really quite distressing to watch nature being completely destroyed all around us. I mean, you know, I'm afraid to open the newspaper in the morning or to open Twitter to see, my God, what is the latest catastrophe that is happening somewhere in the world? And I think for a lot of people working in this area, you know, that aspect of it can be quite traumatizing. I don't think I'm even exaggerating using that word. But I think, you know, the love of the natural world and my interest in it certainly keeps me going, because ultimately there is a lot we can do about it. And as long as there's things we can do about it, we should be trying our very best.
Okay, so you talked there about a lot has changed and crises and stuff. So the biggest crisis, I suppose, well, one of the biggest crises of our time is COVID-19. And has this changed much for your work?
Well, not especially. I work from home anyway. A lot of our work tends to be kind of analysing policies and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Of course, with the government coming up, we spent a lot of time on the programme for government and the election and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, the only thing that really has changed is that we can't get out and about as much as we used to. But that also brings maybe a greater appreciation of what's nearer to us, and you know, maybe taking pleasure in the smaller things, the cheaper things, you know, the things that we've already had for a long time.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. So I'm just wondering, in terms of COVID-19 as well, you know, any creative ideas that you've seen arising out of that?
Yeah, I think COVID has been, you know, horrific on the one hand, but fascinating on the other. I mean, to me, very early on, I saw that the COVID-19 pandemic was really just one facet of the biodiversity crisis and the extinction crisis that we have been living through. And, you know, anyone who's been paying attention to pandemics and what are called zoonotic diseases will know that a lot of these diseases are coming from deforested regions, from illegally trafficked wildlife. I mean, the COVID-19 in particular has been implicated with the pangolin, which is one of the most trafficked animals in the world. And when you think about it, you're taking an animal that has evolved for millions of years in its natural habitat and transferring it to the other side of the world, you know, packing it in with other animals, maybe in unhygienic conditions. It's, you know, from an ecological point of view, it's completely catastrophic. And also it highlights that, you know, our health as people is not separate from the health of nature. It really is one and the same thing.
Okay, so I'd say we'll have a lot of questions from our listeners about that. So don't forget, if you do have a question for Pádraic, please submit at the chat function at the bottom of your screens. So just my last question for you, Pádraic, is around, it sounds from what you're speaking about from your work that it's very multidisciplinary. And does interdisciplinarity play a role in your work?
I think it's absolutely a crucial aspect of it. And as an example, you might think anybody who cares about curlew. So the curlew, for those who don't know, is a ground nesting bird that is really on the verge of extinction in Ireland. And anybody who has gone out to try and make efforts to save the curlew will quickly find themselves having a conversation about farmers' incomes and inequality in the farming community. And then when you start talking about those kind of things, you start talking about international trade and commodity markets and free market policies and you know, capitalism and all of these things. So I think one of the real lessons for us has to be the interconnectedness of things. Now, you know, ecologists out there it's drilled into us that, you know, everything is interconnected. If you affect one species, it's going to have an impact on another species. But we have to start seeing ourselves as part of that network of life, and everything we do is interconnected with that. So I think the bottom line is that in order to address the climate and biodiversity crises, we really also have to address inequality and our economic system as well, because they're one and the same thing at the end of the day.
Okay, wow, I'm sure we'll have lots of questions, and actually they're already coming in, Pádraic. So let's kick off. I'll go through some of the questions already in, so I'm just going to read them out to you. So is the programme for government good for addressing biodiversity loss?
Okay, a very topical question, and I stayed up late last night reading this document, and I have to say there's an awful lot of positive things in it, and ultimately it will come down to the implementation of it. But I think on the whole, if we do the things that are set out in the programme for government, we will get on the way. Of course, urgency and leadership will be vital in doing that. But as a document, as it stands, I have to say I've been very encouraged by what I read yesterday.
Okay, that's great. So it's a completely different question, but what are your top tips for supporting wildlife in our gardens?
Well, the best thing you can do is do nothing, or as little as possible. You know, if you can cut down on mowing, if you can, you know, let native trees grow, and you know, certainly not use herbicides and pesticides, you'd be very surprised how quickly insects and birds and you know, wildlife will come and visit your garden.
Yeah, well, I have 7 foxes in my garden dancing around most days, so
I'm very envious.
I need to not mow it. That's maybe what I need.
Yeah.
So okay, here's another question for you. COVID-19 is as a result of horrible human practices, but will it be a net benefit in the long run, as it's caused such a jolt to the economic system and forced good things like telecommuting and the stopping of unnecessary travel?
So again,
yeah, if you need me to summarize, I will. Just
No, that's fine. I think we're at a major crossroads in human civilization, if I'm allowed. You know, even, you know, I don't think it's even a slight exaggeration. You know, we've known the last few years the warnings from climate scientists, from biologists, about the massive effects that destruction of the Earth's systems is having, and these effects are happening extraordinarily quickly. Now, whether the question is, will COVID-19 help us focus on those things and help us change our ways? I certainly hope so. But really, the bottom line is that it's really up to all of us to make sure that those changes happen. Whether it's in your community or on your campus or at a political level or whatever way you can, these things are up for grabs. And so that's, like I said earlier, we have to really be working as hard as we can to make sure that the right decisions are made, because the last thing we want people to think is that there's no hope, that really it's just gone too far and we just sit back and watch it all unfold. That will really be the most disastrous outcome.
Okay, so a question along the same lines are there plans in place that you know of that seek to reforest parts of Ireland?
Well, the programme for government yesterday included some very interesting statements about creating large permanent forests that will not be grown for any kind of commercial purposes. So I think that's very interesting. Now, they didn't put any figures on it, and there's pluses and minuses to that. I think the main challenge we have here is our relationship with nature. Can we tolerate the idea that there's land that's only for nature, that there's no commercial extract to it? In Ireland, every square meter, is used for something. And we've traditionally only ever seen land as useful if it's, if there's some kind of a cash stream coming out of it. But if we can change that relationship with nature to recognize that nature has a right to exist, I think that would be an absolute game changer, far more than any government plan, and that's really where we need to be going.
Yeah, and actually along those lines, a question came in around that, and the Green Party now being part of the government, and they said basically, what policy would you encourage the Green Party to press for in government as likely to provide most effect for least cost?
So I would say investing in a nature conservation agency is the most urgent issue we have at the moment. Now, the National Parks and Wildlife Service is our nature conservation agency. It's grossly underfunded. It hasn't been able to implement the laws and the regulations that we have at the moment. So if we were able to, really regenerate the National Parks and Wildlife Service, make it an independent agency so it can come up with the science and the advice and the education for everybody, for communities and individuals, I think that lots of good things will flow from that. The amount of money we give to nature conservation is really pathetic at the moment. We give more money to greyhound racing than we do to the National Parks and Wildlife Service, which is a scandal in my view. And it's one thing I'll be looking at most closely now in any new government. Are they going to get these priorities right?
Okay, so we've absolutely tons of questions and about 2 or 3 more minutes left to get through them, so we probably won't, and that's a good thing. So don't forget to keep submitting your questions if you have any, and we'll send them to Pádraic afterwards and be able to get you answers. So does the gentrification and urbanization of Western societies lead inevitably to lower biodiversity?
Well, really, the issue with Western society is consumption. That has always been the case, and I suppose it's what links, let's say, colonization and the development of capitalism and even racism to biodiversity loss. It is this, just totally unsustainable consumption of forests and wetlands and fish and, you name it. And that has traditionally been a Western idea, of course. Countries in the developed world now, fair enough, they want to aspire to the lifestyle that we have, which just it simply isn't possible. So I think what we really have to be looking at is for Western societies to start downgrading our consumption, living simpler lives, maybe like we're doing with COVID, just not buying as much and not using as much stuff. I think that's quite possible, though.
So along the same lines, what's the best way to incentivize farmers to afforest in a non-commercial way? Maybe that was supposed to be reforest in a non-commercial way. So the best way to incentivize farmers to do that.
So there's this idea of rewilding. Rewilding is where, basically nature just decides what's best to plant on any particular patch of land. We know if you do absolutely nothing, if you did nothing with your garden, for instance, it would eventually turn into a forest. So the best way to incentivize farmers for doing that is paying them. We pay them at the moment for producing beef and lamb, and we penalize them for allowing natural habitats develop on their land. So again, this is one thing that did appear in the program for government yesterday. If we can, get the balance right between food production and having land that is only for nature, I think people would really enthusiastically embrace it, including farmers.
Okay, so lots of questions, but I'm just going to one last one because we're running out of time. So the native red squirrel is now in every county in Ireland, partly thanks to the recently legally protected pine martens killing grey squirrels. Can all three eventually live together harmoniously, or will grey squirrels always be a detriment risk to red squirrels?
I'm not sure there's an awful lot that's harmonious that's going on in nature in these relationships. For one, I mentioned I live near the Phoenix Park. We had red squirrels back in the 1980s, and they've disappeared now, and it's grey squirrels. I'd love to see the red squirrels come back, and I'd love to see pine martens come back. I'd love to see wolves come back, and bears. I really want to see all our wildlife come back. The grey squirrels, I don't want to vilify them. We brought them here, but I wouldn't miss them if they were gone. Put it that way.
All right, well, Pádraic, we've run out of time. I'm so sorry, but thank you so much, Pádraic, for a captivating discussion today. And thanks so much to everyone for listening. And we run these sessions, these Zoom for Thoughts, we run them weekly. So check out zoomforthought.ie or sign up by emailing discovery@ucd.ie. Thanks again, Pádraic. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, Patricia. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye.